Just for a minute, imagine this situation. You've just landed a job, but you got it after spending a day speed reading a dummy's guide to the thing that you've just been hired for, the role that you're about to perform. And so in you go and you start and you try to sound as if you know what you're talking about because you've picked up a few phrases from this dummy's guide, and you're very lucky you get to meet a couple of people that you can secretly ask questions, and they're very supportive. And so you are just getting away with it for a while until your sense of what the heck am I doing? I am totally fraudulent in this job gets the better of you, and you feel pretty miserable. I'm going to come back to that story at the end of this episode with a very interesting new insight that I've had. First of all, can I just say that is someone being an actual imposter. So if we're going to talk about imposter syndrome feelings, am I stupid to feel like an imposter? In many respects, no, you would be an imposter if that was your story. I mean, let's be honest, we've all done a bit of that, haven't we? But that actual fraud thing isn't what imposter syndrome is all about. Imposter syndrome feelings, I'm going to say, are all about, is it? So what is imposter syndrome? Well, I'm going to give you a very non-nuanced nutshell. A persistent feeling that somehow your success is not deserved, or that you are in some way a fraud, even if you're not. I'm Tricia Lewis. Welcome to Self-Belief Unsquashed, where we explore very, very real human feelings and behaviors and the stuff that holds us back, those self-doubt traps and all of the, well, imposter syndrome-y type feelings, if you like. And I really do share stuff that is very human and very real. For instance, that story I just shared is my story. It was a long time ago, but yeah, it was a very technical job, and I'm not a very techie type of person. So you can imagine that tightrope I was walking. Whew. Yes, the topics we explore are very real, and they're based on my experience, the experience of talking with my coaching clients, or just general conversations. So one big message of all of this is you are not alone. You are human. And I just gave you a very non-nuanced overview of imposter syndrome. But in this episode, we are going to explore some nuance. I mean, are you stupid to feel like an imposter? Could it be, and here's a thought to just nudge these different perspectives, that you are not embracing some of these feelings? You are not harnessing some of these feelings. You are not seeing the upsides of imposter syndrome feelings. Did I really say that? Look, let's get on with this. Let's do the forensics. Let's look at some symptoms, some drivers, and importantly, some reframes and a little challenge that I set you. Love a good quote. Listen to this. The more comfortable we become with being stupid, the deeper we will wade into the unknown, and the more likely we are to make discoveries. I'm going to repeat it. The more comfortable we become with being stupid, the deeper we will wade into the unknown, and the more likely we are to make discoveries. Yes, thank you, Martin A. Schwartz. This was from an article he wrote, which I will link around this episode, and it was called The Importance of Stupidity in Scientific Research. Now, look, if I just gleefully rabbited on about how amazing imposter syndrome is and how, it's your superpower and makes you a very special person, you would quite rightfully probably switch off at this point. And I'd expect you to, because that would be incredibly dismissive of what is actually often a really debilitating feeling. And I know from personal experience. So that's not what I'm going to do. But I am going to put in a couple of, shall we say, flip the script perspectives, just to get you thinking that actually there's more to this than just a horrible thing that makes you feel useless and stupid and all the rest of it. And after I've given you this little thought nudger, I will, of course, to show you I'm not being dismissive, have a quick look at the more negative side of imposter syndrome. But have a think about this. Flipping the script. Could imposter syndrome be a spur, a friendly alarm call, if you like? Could your inner critic self-doubt chatter be telling you something useful? Could this feeling be a sign that you're stepping out of your comfort zone and into a fabulous learning adventure? Could it be a sign that you are not being fully you? And you'd expect me to include this because this is my self-squashing theory. Are you suppressing your true self for fear that releasing your full passion, personality, and power will have you judged as an unlikable show-off? Is this a wake-up call? My personal story would suggest yes, there is an upside because yes, the wake-up call thing is for real. Can I just suggest you look at my TEDx talk at this stage, Beware the Self-Squashing Prophecy, because I actually share that story in a nice little short condensed way in that talk. But let's move on. I said I wasn't going to be dismissive, and I'm definitely not going to be. Quick reality check. Imposter syndrome feelings, if left unharnessed, or indeed if dismissed as you just being a bit stupid or a bit of a failure or whatever, that's definitely not ideal. So what are the symptoms that you need to spot? Things like a sense that you're surviving every day rather than thriving. You do your best, you're, fitting the mold, but you're coming away feeling somehow down. Ugh. Also, as if you've betrayed yourself in some weird way, but you can't quite put your finger on it. Things like comparisonitis, things like people pleasing, dismissing your achievements as fluke, or just maybe that you've worked so hard to get something done. That's the only reason that you've got away with it. All of these things just meaning that you're not reaching your full potential and that you're not getting much joy out of what you're doing. And definitely your motivation levels are going to be low. So what's driving it? Human stuff. I talk about the fibs that hold us back, and this is so relevant. The fears, illusions, and baggage. There's early influences. What were you surrounded by in terms of the messaging about what made someone successful, what made them a failure? Were you often in places where there was a real lack of diversity and you actually genuinely would feel very out of place and not seen? There's so much to this, and that's not totally what this episode is about. I want to delve into this weird upside of imposter syndrome that might get you thinking. So let's do that. Let's pivot a bit to see something positive about imposter syndrome feelings. First of all, I quite like a spectrum, don't you? I talk about it when I talk about assertiveness, for instance, with passive at one end and aggressive at the other end, and this lovely place of assertiveness in the middle. People often think of assertiveness as aggressiveness, but it's not. That's your sweet spot. And with all of this imposter syndrome thing and confidence, imagine one end of the spectrum as being what is known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. That is, you're rather clueless idiot. Somebody, won't be you, by the way, listener, who doesn't realize that they're actually not that clever, not that competent, but they go around being very cocky about everything they do. Yeah, Dunning-Kruger is the research name, so I'll put a link to that around here. So at the other end, we've got extreme anxiety, real underestimation of your competence, if you like. And that's a suffocating sense of not fitting in, not being good enough, etc. But what we want is a nice balance somewhere in the middle. We don't want to get rid of your confidence and those moments where you actually quite rightfully feel cock-a-hoop about what you're achieving. Why shouldn't you when it's for real? But we also want you to retain an element of that questioning. You know, maybe this isn't my top skill at the moment. I'm going to have to work on this. So either end is what we'd call a distortion of reality. And in the middle is something that you can actually aim for. It's for real. And you'll feel much more aligned with your real. Confident humility. I'll just quickly give you a quote. And I think this is where I first heard that phrase. It's from Adam Grant, and it's in his book, Think Again, which I thoroughly recommend. Listen to this, very relevant. We become blinded by arrogance when we're utterly convinced of our strengths and our strategies. We get paralyzed by doubt when we lack conviction in both. Blinded by arrogance, paralyzed by doubt. Two extremes. We can be consumed by an inferiority complex when we know the right method, but feel uncertain about our ability to execute it. What we want to attain is confident humility, having faith in our capability while appreciating that we may not have the right solution or even be addressing the right problem. That gives us enough doubt to re-examine our own knowledge and enough confidence to pursue new insights. Thank you, Adam Grant. So that's all very well, but how do we go about finding that nice place in the middle? Here's some quick tips. Know yourself. Well, that is the self-awareness magic card, isn't it, that I go on about a lot, but that's how I've made this journey, and that's, I know, the most important ingredient of all this. So don't hide those feelings. Question them. Why am I feeling like this? What do I get most buzz out of doing? What do I feel most confident about? Where do I feel most confident? Just, spot the triggers and all of that stuff. Number 2, cultivate a growth mindset. I'm sure you've by now heard of the book by Carol Dweck, and I will put a link to that as well in here. But it is just that general sense of constant curiosity. Never stop evolving, never stop learning. And as I say, adopt the Toto method. Try, observe, try, observe. Yes. Number 3, experiment. Take a few risks, sensibly. And number 4, practice self-compassion. Stop beating yourself up. We all do it. We all do it. And number 5, this is really important. And again, it's something I touch on in the story I share in my TEDx talk. Find your tribe. You might not be able to get that perfect in a workplace. You might, even if you're starting up in business, have to go to, you might have to kiss a few frogs in terms of networking events, shall we say, and all of that. But ultimately, throughout that, the more you can have a few people around you that get you, that aren't asking you to fit too much into a mold, that you can be honest with and vulnerable with and get a buzz when you're around them with, the better. Imposter syndrome itself doesn't really have an upside, but the behaviors that are often associated with people who talk about having imposter syndrome do. Things like questioning your assumptions, practicing a healthy form of humility, being curious, often having a lot of empathy, all of these things adding to interpersonal connection. They're all good things if you recognize them. So how can I sum up? The feelings aren't stupid. You're not stupid. In fact, you're more than likely quite a, shall we say, thinker, sometimes overthinker. You need simply to harness these feelings. Don't seek to eliminate them or cure them. Don't question yourself. Yes, self-awareness, but that's not the same as, am I, just stupid? Am I just a bit of a failure? No, but do question. Question your ideas, question your knowledge, question the gaps that you need to fill to pursue something you're really interested in and the skills you need to acquire. Question others. Yes, say you don't know when you don't know. Get input. And that brings me right back in a circle to that story I shared at the beginning and this little insight that I've had. When I was doing this job, and I was only in my early 20s, I'd like to say, I just kept on this horrible hamster wheel of that dreaded feeling of being caught out because I really didn't have the experience to do this. I charmed my way, shall we say, into this job, and I continued to charm my way into getting input from various suppliers and all the rest of it to make me sound as if I slightly knew what I was talking about. But what I never did was ask questions to learn, because of course I trapped myself in this fake it cage. It was too late, really, to say, oh, I don't know much about XYZ. I'd like to learn. Because they might have turned around and said, well, you gave us the impression at the interview that you knew quite a lot about XYZ. So don't go down that road. You might sort of get down it a little way, but press the brakes pretty quickly, because you need to be able to be vulnerable, to be curious. And that means not having to keep up a facade, which is absolutely exhausting and joy sapping. And the thing with imposter syndrome is it kind of works in a bit of a knock-on effect, vicious cycle. I don't need to go into that because you know what I mean. So, you see, I keep learning, and that's what I'm saying. Let's just keep learning. I hope that's given a slightly more nuanced look at imposter syndrome, and perhaps you can just ask a few questions about those feelings now. Stay curious and unsquashed. So just a reminder, if you're curious about this whole idea of self-squashing, then my website, trishalewis.com, has some resources on it. And of course, you've got all the other episodes to look back on of this podcast. My book, The Mystery of the Squash Self, my TEDx, Beware the Self-Squashing Prophecy. All of that stuff is there for you. Stay curious and unsquashed.